Hey everybody, really happy to finally be making this video. This is GVS010, or the Gleix Video Synth number 10. It's the next in a line of video-centric builds I've been making partially on commission, and is also the first of its kind to utilize a fully revamped design that moves away from hand-wired circuits and components and controls, and over to PCBs and silkscreen printed front panels. So between GVS009 and this build, I spent a couple months working to redesign the internals of this thing. So now the internal circuits are all built into a single printed circuit board, and all the controls are also PCB mounted controls. So they all slot directly into this front panel that I've designed, and I'm really happy with where it's at. The person that commissioned this build initially had come to me asking to potentially design their own front panel, and while we ended up going with my designs, it acted as an opportunity for me to finally say, okay, this is a chance to finally standardize things a little bit and try and get away from the way that I was doing things and actually integrate things and standardize a little bit more. So I'm really happy with how it's all come together. Yeah, so that's where we're at. If you're on the waiting list, thank you so much for your patience. This is the result of the past few months of iterating and iterating on the internals, as well as the panels that everything slots into. So yeah, without further ado, why don't we just go through this thing? I've made so many videos in the past on this style of build, and this is still pretty much the same thing, just there are a few additional features and quality of life improvements, and a few minor revisions, things here and there. But for the most part, it's still the same basic thing. So without further ado, let's get into it a little bit. Over here on the very right, like in all the previous models, we have a latching push button for power on and off. Let's go ahead and turn this thing on. We have a switch to go between NTSC and PAL video output, and that video output is over here on the very right of our rear I/O panel. This is a composite video output, and right next to it is a composite video input. And to switch to this input and away from the internal feedback loop that we've got going right now, we would just push this switch into the up position, which I'll get into in a little bit. We also have a VGA video output, and we have a 1/4 inch or an 1/8 inch audio input. These both go to the same place. This is just a way of choosing between either of those jack sizes. And then we also have a 2.1 mil barrel jack for power. This is center positive, and it runs on 12 volts. Previous models, most of them ran on 5 volts. This one runs on 12, as will all future models of this type. So because I've made so many videos on similar builds in the past that go in depth into the functionality of it all, I am going to gloss over some stuff. So if you'd like to learn more about some of the things I don't really get into, be sure to check out some of the other videos on this channel for previous builds. So first things first, over here we have image direction controls for up, down, left, and right. All these buttons have been replaced with little PCB mounted tactile clicky buttons that are slightly raised above the front panel. So this is a way to move the image around on screen, which will subsequently direct the movement of the feedback on screen. And pressing left and right at the same time will let us snap back to the center. This button with a magnifying glass up here will let us easily zoom in and zoom back out. We also have this black button and a switch in an octagon right here. These are both ways to freeze the image. So this button will let us easily freeze whatever is on screen at the moment, or we could also just latch it with this switch. This button here will let us go into a menu where we can change things like the vertical size, the horizontal size, as well as the hue for more or less bands of color, as well as playing with some other color spaces. And we can also press left and right here to snap back to the default for these parameters. Over here are our main color mix knobs for red, green, and blue, so we can dial all those out. And we also have a pulse button for each of those colors, so red, green, and blue. Keep in mind I do have the colors shifted a little bit, so they're not 100% red, green, and blue. So let's dial these back up and get our feedback back how it was. So next is we have a little oscillator / LFO here. This is our on switch for it. This is going to show the rate of our LFO. We can send that to red, green, and blue. So let's send it to the red channel. We're now flashing the red channel on and off. We can also change the range of speeds of our LFO here with this switch in this diamond. This will switch it to a high range of speeds and let it act like a standard oscillator. And what that means in the video space is that we can find multiples of 60 Hertz to create scan lines. So right now we're making a scan line on the red channel. You can send that to the green channel as well, etc., etc. And this is something that I'm excited about because it's something that I discovered on my DIY modular a while ago that I finally implemented into this standalone build, and that is the ability to send that LFO to the freeze function, which is multifaceted. So with this acting like an LFO, this switch with the arrow going down here to the freeze switch will let us send the LFO to the freeze function. So this is kind of like a strobe on an old video mixer. Let me just adjust a few parameters here. So now we're pulsing that freeze on and off with our LFO. And we can adjust the rate of speed with it as well. And because we can go into scan line rates, first let's find a nice scan line on the red channel. Let's find right around 60 Hertz. Looks to be right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get our feedback going again, and I'm going to send it back to the freeze function. It's a slit scan. So by sending that 60 Hertz oscillator signal to our freeze function, we can allow this to act like a slit scan that will freeze and then reset pixels as it scans through. Really excited about it. It's not a perfect cutoff, it's a little glitchy, but yeah, I'm happy about it. You know, we can also dial out the depth a little bit, and it won't grab every single pixel. We'll get kind of some leftover pixels there, which looks kind of cool. Kind of like that. We'll kind of slowly build. Maybe dial out a color and then pulse it. And this also works great with external video inputs, like you might imagine, which we will get to in a little bit. Then up here we have a switch for an internal audio amplifier, which will amplify the audio input if we are sending something here. And if we're not, we can also still just turn this on and then send that audio amplifier to the color channels, and it's just a way of adding some noise because at very high gain, the audio amplification circuit is a bit noisy. So with all three of them, we're getting some mostly monochrome noise. It's not terribly exciting, but you know, it's one way to play with the feedback, and can also create some kind of vertical-looking feedback looks. So with this switch in the down position, our audio input is simply a pass-through to the color channels. So let's go ahead and plug something up here. So again, in the down position, this audio is being directly passed through and bypassing the amplifier, and the amplifier is totally off. In the up position, the audio amplifier is now on, and our audio signal is now being passed through the audio amplifier. So let's go ahead and play a little bit of music, and you'll see what we can do with audio here. not terribly exciting. We can create scan lines with audio. I go into more depth in how that actually works and some things that you can do with it in the video for GVS006, which I will link to in the video description. Next up, over here, this is our section for CV input. So this is a semi-modular device. We have CV control for the red, green, and blue channel, as well as image direction for up, down, left, and right, and zooming in and out. So I've got a Moog Mother 32 here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to send a square LFO to the red channel, so we can flash the red channel on and off with the LFO of an external modular device. This responds to 0 to 5 volts. It is unipolar, so if the red channel is all the way up, it's not going to swing negative. It's only going to grab 0 to 5 volts. So we can also change our LFO over here to multiples of 60 hertz to build perfect square scan lines. We can do the same thing for the green channel. So a nice scan line rate. And the blue channel. Let me slow down that LFO a little bit. And so up, down, left, and right, as well as the zoom button, have on and off switches. So if we are sending our up image shift CV, and we want it to go up one tick with every pulse of this LFO, we can also turn that off. Let's move it over to down, and we flip the switch up. So it's just basically a way of killing the CV, which is important because if we're menu diving and we don't want to be repatching everything that we've got, it's nice to be able to easily just turn that off so it stops fooling around with our menu. And it's the same deal with this zoom CV input, so we have to flip that switch on, and now we are controlling that with the LFO. There's obviously a limit to how fast it's going to actually receive that input, which looks to be right around here where we're missing some hits. It looks like this is about as fast as we can zoom in and out. We're getting some interesting artifacts as well. So let's get into this patch panel up here. This is split into 3 separate sections, each with their own little icon. This section up here is labeled with a square turning into kind of a garbled mess, which, as you might have guessed, means that this is a place where we can start adding glitches and whatnot to whatever image we've got on screen. This is split into some subsections. So right up here we have these 3 points labeled RGB, which means these points correspond directly to those 3 color channels. So we can do something like send an external signal directly into these color channels. So, rather than sending an external oscillator from the Mother 32 to CV, we can send it directly to one of these color channels like I'm doing right now. We can also send these color channels directly out as audio. Those are going to give us a 60 hertz tone that is representative of the color on screen. If you want to learn more about how that sounds and how it looks, check out the video for GVS006 or the DIY video modular that I recently put out. We also have a point that corresponds to horizontal and vertical sync, a point for ground. This point goes to 3.3 volts, and this point with an exclamation mark goes to a point where in all the previous videos I said if you connect this patch point to something, it will change the mode that it's running in. So what this does is it ends up making the colors limited and making everything look kind of blocky and pixelated, which is interesting in its own way, but it's also something that requires you to reset the device to go back to normal, hence exclamation mark. But I did think that I would include it anyway. And then the rest of these points are just other points on a RAM chip inside of here. So these points over here will often lead to posterizing and playing with luminance and color, and these points over here will more often create some interesting effects with interlacing and whatnot. And you can also obviously cross these points. And then because it's easy for us to send external signals directly into the color path here, we can do stuff like take an external signal generator running at a very specific frequency, and then we can create diagonal lines, or we can combine signal generators to create shapes. If you want to learn more about this process, check out the video that I did for the DIY video modular, where I go into a bit more depth into how this is done. But yeah, if you pick up a couple cheap signal generators, then you can send those signals directly into the RGB path here and create shapes. So then there's this section, which is labeled with a little heart, and that is for favorites. So the idea being, if you find a set of patch points that you like, if you like the effect it causes, like this kind of posterizing effect, but you don't want to be patching it all the time, you want to save it, you can say, okay, this point and this point, I want to say, let's send one point there and one here. And both of these points are now going directly to this switch, so I can turn that patch connection on and off really easily. And we have 4 of those. So then up here we just have a few extra buttons. This will let us cycle through some different menu items. These are menu items that are saved, that have their settings saved when you turn this thing off and on. So typically I will dial these in as I like, so we can turn this thing on and immediately have some feedback going. Because these menu items over here, these are reset when you turn the device off and on. So this is like a nice little playground to make adjustments to, whereas these, it's nice to create a nice starting point and just leave it be most of the time. So you just cycle through menu items up here with this button, and then you change them up or down with this plus or minus button. And then this is a button that I included, even though it's not really being used right now. This is a source select to go between a VGA input and a composite video input, but right now there's no VGA input being used. We're just taking composite video in and using the switch to break the feedback and switch over to this. So also this minus button, if you're not in the menu, this will change the resolution and cycle through different resolutions and refresh rates. So at different resolutions, it's going to become an issue because part of this feedback loop is maxes out at 1024 by 768. So to just snap back to the default where I tend to leave it, just press the plus button, and that'll go back to 1024 by 768 at 60 hertz. Though I will say you can go up to 75 hertz, which will not always work out in your favor, but what it will do is change the pitch of the tone coming out. So if you're playing with audio a little bit and you want to change the tone back and forth easily, you can kind of switch between 60, 75 hertz, 60, 75 hertz. But typically, again, I just leave this at 1024 by 768 at 60 hertz, which is the default that you snap to when you press that plus button. Alright, so let's play around with processing some external video. So what we can do is just flip this switch in the back here to go to the external video input, but the problem there is that it's going to be processed with the same weird color shifting that we're doing. And it's also a bit washed out, it's a bit bright. It just processes external signals a little differently than the internal feedback loop. So it's really best to just turn the device on with this switch already in the position to process external video. So here's my desktop. First I'll pull this up. Here's a dancing duck, GIF, GIF. I'll say it both ways so no one yells at me. I don't know who made this, but I love it. So, I went more in depth into really playing around with processing external video and some different techniques in the video for GVS008. So I will link that in the description. Be sure to check that out. But I did think I'd play around with processing a little bit here. Let's turn on that strobe function. Now let's play with a Slit-scan. So it's not a perfect hard cutoff on this Slit-scan. It is a little, it's a little glitchy. There's some leftover pixels, but I don't know, for this purpose I kind of like it. And then next, for all this lo-fi glitchy stuff, I tend to like pulling up old VHS tapes. Let me turn that off so I can see my mouse. Wow, that's a really flattering still of me as a child. Play with colors a little bit. Let's see what we can find on the patchbay. Oh, oh no! Undo, delete. That was horrifying. Where was that? Wow, that's great. Okay. I'm gonna press play. June 27th, 2001. Check me out. Let's play with that Slit-scan a little bit. And you know, this kind of thing, processing an external video, this will also let this thing act like a loopback with a video mixer. So actually, I think I'll demo that here in a few minutes as well when I stop playing with these colors, which I'm just going to keep doing for now. Let's just play around with this thing a little bit more. So one thing that I actually didn't mention is that this freeze function, I've brought it up on previous videos, but if you turn the device on while the device has either this button, the freeze button, or this freeze latch switch engaged, it'll start up in what I was referencing earlier and calling like an alternate mode or an alternate pixel mode, where everything's a little bit blocky and pixelated, and that's what this looks like. So everything's kind of, blocky, I guess. There are a million ways that you could describe this. So like the color space gets a little weird, and if you're trying to create feedback while in this mode, you're gonna have a bit more trouble. But it is a little interesting to me. Anyway, let's reset that. Let's go back to normal. Just let that boot back up real quick. Okay. Oh, I did not hold the camera very steady at all, huh? Let me find like a spot with my face. Oh, there's Ellie. And again, I did kind of explore this a little bit more in the video for GVS008, so be sure to check that out. Alright, so I think I'll go ahead and wrap things up here. I know this was a lot of information and I went kind of quick, but again, I do have other videos that cover a lot of this stuff in a bit more depth, so I will be sure to have those linked in the description if you'd like to learn more about some of the specific functions that I may have glossed over. This specific machine was commissioned by Avinash Kumar. He's a co-founder of Quicksand Design Studio in India, which does all sorts of cool stuff. You can check him out over at antariksha.sanchar on Instagram and over at quicksand.co.in. You can find me in a catalog of previous builds and stuff over at gleix.net. This is also where you can get in touch with any questions you might have, check on major updates and releases, or inquire about having something commissioned for yourself. I'm also at Gleix on Instagram if you'd like to keep up with what I'm doing. And as always, thanks for checking this out. I'll catch you here with the next one. Take care, everyone.